If you've ever heard anything about El Salvador, if you've heard of Bitcoin City, of the fact that they legalized Bitcoin as tender in the country, this dream of a city that runs entirely on Bitcoin and sustainable energy. And the city stands at the slopes of this volcano. Well, these are the slopes, and the city below is La Unión, and that's where maybe someday Bitcoin City will exist.
El Salvador would be the first country to make Bitcoin an official currency.
It's the evolution of humankind. So we're going there.
Nayib Bukele declared Bitcoin as legal tender. Bitcoin ATMs convert greenbacks into digital currency.
Adopting Bitcoin as legal tender, as a legal currency. What does that actually mean?
President Nayib Bukele had promised Bitcoin City would be a tax haven for crypto enthusiasts.
In the months following this news, the Bitcoin community went crazy. Finally, a country is proving that Bitcoin can be used as a currency. And on the other hand, of course, critics of the government, critics of Bitcoin, the IMF, they all came out to say that this was a terrible idea.
More than 1,000 people marched in El Salvador's capital on Tuesday to protest the government's adoption of Bitcoin as a legal tender.
Also going to be for illegal use and attractive place for money laundering.
So, which is it? For a YouTube channel, for a news outlet, for a crypto influencer, it's just so easy to just send someone and capture what they need to reinforce their argument and to sell what they're selling.
Bitcoin can never be backed, can never owe anyone any money, can never scam you. Bitcoin can never hurt you, and I will keep saying that until the day I die.
Bitcoin is a sexy story, it gets views, and so does criticizing it. The government strictly and selectively filters out what you see about the country. And of course, the government, all they want is praise. I'm Costa Rican, I'm just a hop away from El Salvador, but even for us who share language, who share culture and food, El Salvador feels distant, and it's become hard to trust the news that come out of the country. But to understand what it's really like, we had to see it for ourselves. We came here with an open mind. We came here with our Bitcoin wallets ready. Welcome to El Salvador. This is the first country in the world to legalize Bitcoin as a tender, as an official currency that you can pay things for. I've been meaning to come here for a while and take on this challenge. Just pay with Bitcoin, everything. We left all our cash at home, and we spent over a week in the country talking to the locals, visiting the town that could become Bitcoin City. We wanted to understand if Bitcoin will be a transformative force for a country that's still struggling to find footing after a very deadly and very painful 20th century. We wanted to understand if the success story is here for others to learn, or if this is just a mirage. I don't think it's gonna work. I think we're gonna have to pull the plug, start paying stuff with credit cards. I don't think we can survive a whole week like this. You know, my family was not excited about me coming to El Salvador this week. Like, there's still this concern and this vibe of how dangerous of a country El Salvador is. To understand what Bitcoin can do for this country, despite all the controversy and all the complications of adopting Bitcoin as a currency, you have to understand a little bit about El Salvador. It's a small Central American country bordered by Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, facing the Pacific Ocean. And it spent the 90s and the 2000s recovering from a devastating civil war.
The fighters are young, some very young. Nicaragua and the Soviet bloc are major suppliers of arms.
The law has just been changed to allow them to be detained without trial for up to 6 months.
Gang violence turned it into one of the most violent and dangerous countries in the world. But that's not the country we travel to.
Este parque en especial sí tenía presencia de
Es una transformación loca.
Es rara, porque yo siento como tranquilidad.
El Zonte is where this Bitcoin movement started. It's a small surf town about an hour away from the capital.
In El Salvador, the reason that El Zonte has become a hotspot for tourism, in my opinion, originated with the surf. Even with Bitcoin, I think it's still the same. You get Bitcoiners who are surfers, Bitcoiners who are looking for a place that is affordable, a place where they feel comfortable. And right now, El Salvador, I think, ticks a lot of those boxes.
Sí, yo puedo vivir pagando con Bitcoin todo. Yo me puedo ir a super selectos y pagar con Bitcoin. Necesito materiales de construcción, me puedo ir a Freo, pago con Bitcoin. Creo que fuimos los primeros que nos metimos a la ola del Bitcoin en cuanto a cuestión de hotelería o restaurante. Estamos tratando de que la comunidad utilice el Bitcoin y es el proyecto que está hasta ahora.
I think you can live just with Bitcoin in El Zonte. There's a solid argument that the government has succeeded with that messaging.
El Zonte Beach.
El Zonte, El Salvador.
Nationalizing Bitcoin put the country on the map, People came to El Salvador for that reason, and El Sonte is just living proof of that.
Hay temporadas que me quedo sorprendido, todas las habitaciones llenas y solo Bitcoin. Generalmente cuando viene la convención se llena todo de Bitcoin.
Cuando sube
la isla, y ahí llego a recibir hasta el 25% de ingresos de Bitcoin.
Most restaurants, hotels, street vendors around El Sonte accept Bitcoin, and I think that's great. But in practice, well, in practice, things are more complicated.
El caballero quiere hacer un pago con Bitcoin de la cerveza.
No sirvió esa.
No sirvió esa. No te está funcionando la wallet.
Sí.
So this place where we had dinner at, they won't take Bitcoin, which actually means I need to get cash out. Without breaking our own rules, I will need to withdraw cash from the ATM. 28,280. They're selling it at 31,997, and then if you want to cash out, it's 25. That's a big spread.
Because of the way Bitcoin and the blockchain works, you need to wait for transactions to be confirmed in the network. That is, that the transaction is added to the block, that the block is mined. In Bitcoin specifically, new blocks are mined normally about every 10 minutes or so. That means that at best, it will take about 10 minutes for a payment to be confirmed in the blockchain. I'm not going into details about how the blockchain works. We already made a whole video about that. It's one of my favorite videos in the channel because we used subway trains and it was really cool. I'll link it in the comments. You can watch it later. All you need to understand for now is that transactions take a while to confirm. Like the person who's receiving the money can't confirm that you sent that money until 10 minutes or so later.
The ATM needs to wait for confirmation. Kind of knew this could happen, but in practice, when there's a guy waiting at the restaurant because they don't take cash, it's their fault for not taking. I mean, it's my fault for not bringing cash. Their fault for not taking cards. It is awkward to just be standing here, waiting for the. Oh God. 7 minutes. Block time was 10 minutes these days. One confirmation. Okay. There you go. It should happen now. Drawing. Get this. Get my phone number. There we go. Trade.
So to counter that transaction time, what some businesses in El Sonte have done is adopt wallets that run on the Lightning Network. Lightning Network is this layer that operates on top of Bitcoin.
Es que no es de Bitcoin. ¿Será que es de otro?
Es de Lightning.
Ah, sí, estoy en Bitcoin. Really, they operate on Lightning. So Lightning is like another cryptocurrency. You essentially have to exchange Bitcoin to Lightning to make it work.
But this is a niche solution. It's growing, but it's not widely adopted. I mean, just look at the subreddits on the Lightning Network versus the Bitcoin subreddit. You need to run your own node. I tried for hours, and I could not solve this while I was there. And that's kind of the point. El Sonte is a bit of a bubble. It's a town for tourists, with prices for tourists that reminded us a bit about Nosara and our experience there a couple years ago. But how does this translate to the rest of the country?
To understand Bitcoin is a whole bunch of technologies put together. So we're dealing with 70% of the population that in this country doesn't even have a bank account, doesn't have access to a bank. So trying to get them to understand the value of Bitcoin is very difficult, right? Because they don't even have an understanding of what money is. They've never been able to go to a bank and withdraw and understand exchange rates, right?
Ahora, todavía el Bitcoin acá no está, o sea, mi nivel de ventas puede ser un 3%. 3, 4%. Ah, es poco. Es poco.
Incluso acá en el Sonte.
Acá en el Sonte. Es lo que recibo, 3, 4, 5.
How far away do I see it? I mean, in personal opinion, like a decade from now, right? Because it's, I mean, the dream or the expectation and the marketing that was put out there is this big, grandioso kind of city, like the Vatican, you would say, right? Yeah. And that takes time. I mean, if you go and you look at Conchagua and where it's supposed to be, there's really no development there.
La Unión is this beautiful, small fisherman's village around the southeast corner of the country. And 1 year ago, there was this good chance that we would have been robbed on our way here. MS-13, or Mara Salvatrucha, is a gang that basically ran the country up until recently. They would have thrown rocks at the car or found a way to blow our tires so that we would stop and then rob us. If one of the members of the robbery was on their initiation ritual, we might have been killed as well. But again, that's not the El Salvador that we're in. And we're gonna talk about this later on. For now, what you need to know is that thanks to how safe the country has become, small and remote towns like La Unión are now reactivated. This dormant volcano, Conchagua, overlooks Honduras and Nicaragua with dozens of small islands in the bay. It is really beautiful. But then, of course, we wanted to understand how much they knew. If they understood that their city could be years away from being drastically transformed.
Para El Salvador es una ventaja. Primero porque va a traer turismo full. De hecho, la zona de La Unión es una parte muy turística que no ha sido tan explotada y creo que el Bitcoin City va a ser para nosotros un boom para traer mucho turista de afuera.
Sí, aquí va a ser la ciudad de Bitcoin. Por eso andamos nosotros acá, porque pensaba invertir en comprar una propiedad acá. Okay. Entonces, por eso ando por acá.
The truth is, outside of El Zonte, the places where you can pay with Bitcoin are few and far between.
Pero el Bitcoin no. Bueno, yo no lo uso y en mi familia nadie tampoco.
En realidad no lo ocupamos mucho, no es porque no sepamos, sino que creo que como salvadoreños estamos acostumbrados hasta el momento a hacer uso más del efectivo.
Como que ya pasó de moda esa moneda, ¿verdad? Incluso creo que las casetas que habían antes, creo que ya las están como quitando.
¿Y usted usa Bitcoin?
No.
¿Ni tiene billetera ni?
No.
En el comercio pequeño casi no lo usan. Y yo trabajo en la venta de verduras.
Yo sinceramente no mucho.
Most people don't understand Bitcoin. They don't really get what it is, or why its value changes so drastically, or whether or not they should be investing or keeping any money in Bitcoin. And most of them don't have the money to really speculate with Bitcoin. It's just too risky. The median income per adult in El Salvador is $440.
La mayoría de gente por las necesidades diarias lo cambia. O sea, ahí tiene el proceso para cambiarlo fácil. Yo hay mucho proveedor, le pago con Bitcoin. Y mi percepción es que lo cambio por el diario vivir.
But here's a catch. It's not easy to find people that criticize the government's policy, especially on camera.
No se están filmando.
Agarrar el Raymond Bukele.
No, apoyemos.
So check it out. I actually printed a copy of the Bitcoin law, and it's not. Don't think that I spent too much paper on this. It's just 3 pages long. Part of the 3 pages is this intro on why the law exists and sort of like justifying why it happened. So it actually starts on the second half of page 1, and it ends on the first part of page 3. So it is like, what, page and a half. 16 articles. Again, this first part just talks about saying like why the law is needed and the fact that most people in the country don't have a bank account. But it essentially states that every single price in the country can now be stated in either Bitcoin or USD. You can pay taxes in Bitcoin. And then, for example, Article 7, which is interesting, every economical agent or every store, commerce, whatever, must accept Bitcoin as a form of payment when it's offered by whoever is purchasing that good or service. This is obviously not enforced, because with this, supposedly, every single store in the country should be able to accept Bitcoin, which is of course not true.
Para usarla acá casi sería más de bajar la Chivo Wallet que le dicen, la que usan acá nacional, y yo no la he bajado. Entonces por eso no la estoy usando.
Falta mucho que la gente se familiarice mucho con el manejo de las carteras electrónicas, que muchas veces la gente asocia directamente el chivo únicamente con el Bitcoin. Y no está mal, pero la gente lo ve como algo con temor todavía.
Bueno, si ahí en el parque habían puesto un cajero y ahí pasaba solo. Total que lo salieron botando porque ya no existe eso.
La realidad es que el costo ha sido muy alto frente al beneficio obtenido, ¿verdad? En la actualidad ni siquiera el 0.2% de la población salvadoreña declara que está usando esta moneda virtual, ¿verdad? Como para algún tipo de transacción.
To motivate people to download Chivo Wallet, which is the government-owned Bitcoin wallet, they gave everyone in the country $30. And you could just redeem this by verifying your ID and then taking the money out.
Cuando dieron los $30, sí, casi todo el mundo, ¿verdad? Lo retiró, pero nunca he usado en nada.
¿Y cuando dieron los $30 del gobierno?
Oh, mucha gente los sacó.
¿Y usted los sacó?
No.
Sí la descargué. Cuando inició todo ese movimiento, lo que hice fue transferirlo a dólar. Lo pasé a mi cuenta personal y retiré el efectivo.
And so we spoke to Ruth Lopez about this. Ruth runs a nonprofit organization that has taken the tough maybe dangerous task of suing the government about many of its actions surrounding Bitcoin adoption, because scams around Chivo Wallet were really common and apparently not that hard to accomplish.
Cuando fue implementado la criptomoneda en El Salvador y fue lanzado por el gobierno una aplicación, una billetera digital, la Chivo Wallet, resulta que miles de personas resultaron afectadas en sus derechos, en la protección de sus datos personales, porque fueron suplantados, su identidad fue suplantada. ¿Qué significa eso? Fue hurtada, eso es un delito que está tipificado en nuestra regulación, en la ley de delitos informáticos, y pues a partir de ahí entonces identificamos cómo se estaban vulnerando los derechos, pero además con el conocimiento del gobierno y que el gobierno no estaba haciendo nada.
Many people were just too scared to download the app altogether or to be prosecuted for taking the money out and not continuing to use it on the Chivo Wallet or to keep it in Bitcoin.
No sé, como que metieron bastante miedo a la gente, no sé.
Claro.
Que el que lo sacara, no sé, se lo iban a descontar y luego lo sacaba nomás por sacarlo.
And the government didn't really want to say how much they paid to develop this wallet, but you can't escape the IRS. And then SEC filings by a US company called Athena Bitcoin Global confirmed that their contract was around $5 million to build this app. Not only that, but the country's been investing in Bitcoin as well, of course with taxpayer money. The country now owns around 2,300 Bitcoin, and the president trades naked on the toilet, according to himself. Now, they bought most of that Bitcoin around the time that Bitcoin peaked at $50,000 per Bitcoin. So that would be around $105 million. That means that today, as we are shooting, their crypto is worth around $30 million less. But it's not for me to guess if that's going to pay off.
As crypto crashes, the Central American country's investment is now worth roughly half what
Is this country going to default?
I mean, that's the question that everybody has right now.
Experts say it's a situation that could become dire for the cash-strapped nation.
En el caso de El Salvador, fue muy fácil llegar a la convicción de que ¿cómo podemos sacar al país de la pobreza? Bueno, pues compremos tantos miles de bitcoins y cuando esto se cotice vamos a encontrar ganancias por todos lados. Es una ingenuidad.
The point is, say what you will. We're here, aren't we? We came to El Salvador because of this. It's a country that's being talked about because of crypto. They're getting free views on our channel, even if people don't adopt it. Can we call this a marketing stunt? And if so, can we measure it as a marketing stunt, as it's like a country promotion brand thing? What's the ROI of this marketing stunt versus the country's income from tourism? But more than Bitcoin, there's another more crucial reason why we're here. We're here because it became much safer to travel to El Salvador. And both of these things, Bitcoin and tourism and how safe the country is, both of these things are closely knit together. But to explain that, we're gonna need a bigger table. So to answer that question, we have to look into how El Salvador got here. And it's not an easy question to answer. And it is a bit outside the scope of what we usually do. We were unsure if we really wanted to tell this part of the story, but it's just too crucial, too important to understand El Salvador today. In the early 90s, the Civil War had just ended. For 12 years, El Salvador was this proxy war nation. The US funded really a tyrannical military and government in an effort to strengthen their presence in the region against the evils of socialism. The Soviet Union, on the other side, funded a guerrilla that was trying to topple the government. This was a bloody and painful period for the country that left over 75,000 people confirmed dead, thousands more disappeared. The scars of the Civil War are fresh and alive for everyone in El Salvador. It was a very painful period for a country, and they're still just recovering from what happened. But perhaps the most painful reminder of this time that's recent and tangible is the gangs. Barrio 18 and MS-13. During the Civil War, thousands of Salvadorians sought asylum in the US, or they just migrated illegally, mainly to haven cities like Los Angeles. And it was in those cities where the Maras started. The excuse was protecting Salvadorians from other gangs in the city. But still, MS-13 quickly rose to become just one of the most violent criminal organizations in the world. After the Civil War ended, many of them were rightfully arrested and then deported back to El Salvador. And this process broke the country. MS-13 is violent and ruthless. It grew to around 60,000 members in the 90s and the 2000s. This is organized crime at a level that few countries around the world have seen.
Hasta los que vendían sorbete, les quitaban lo poquito que habían vendido. Y ellos tienen que entregar, pues.
que ante una situación de pobreza extrema, los pobres de un sector empezaron a extorsionar a los pobres de otro sector. Entonces las maras se convirtieron en prácticamente una forma de escape de esa situación grave.
The maras changed society in El Salvador. It made it the fourth most violent country in the Western Hemisphere. Gang members murdered people for sport as part of their initiation rituals. Women were disproportionate victims of domestic violence and robberies and sexual assault. And the country became a hostage to its gangs. During the years after the Civil War, the government was busy with economic reform. In the year 2000, for example, they adopted the US dollar as their main currency. And they were trying to find the culprits for the war crimes, trying to find somebody to blame. But economically, the country was stalling. Nobody wanted to invest in such a violent and dangerous country, and nobody was solving the problem with the gangs. Right and left-wing presidents came and went. Some have been convicted or exiled because of corruption during their term. But in 2019, this young businessman who was the mayor of San Salvador, the capital, won a landslide election to become the first Salvadorian president in almost 30 years that didn't come from one of the major political parties, which had also played a part in the war. Nayib Bukele was able to form this strong coalition around him, enough to secure a supermajority in Congress and to pretty much pass any legislation that he wanted. Immediately after he came to power, the murder rates in El Salvador just dropped drastically. Independent newspaper El Faro, who recently had to move down to Costa Rica, their headquarters, because of fear of prosecution by the government, they accused the government of making a deal with the gangs to reduce murders and to make this new government seem successful. And there are hundreds of documents and logs of government employees visiting these gang leaders in jail. US intelligence has come to the same conclusion as well, but of course the Salvadorian government denies any deal with the gangs. But this didn't stop Bukele. He and his brother are just skilled marketers, and they've built this narrative around their rule that has earned him the highest approval rating of any current president in the entire world. Deal or no deal with the gangs, things started getting worse again. And then on a single weekend in March 2022, 80 people were murdered in the country. This is the most violent weekend in over a century. The fragile balance that had been struck with the gangs had broken, but this time, the government had the support, they had the political power to strike the hammer. With Congress and with overwhelming support of the population, plus this strong visual and aggressive campaign around the crackdown on crime, it implemented a régimen d'exception, a state of exception in the country, which allowed them to temporarily remove 4 constitutional rights: the freedom of association, the right to a trial for people that have been arrested, the right to privacy, which essentially allows the government to tap any phone without a warrant, and the maximum amount of time that you can be arrested without being charged. So, in other words, the government in El Salvador can arrest anyone for any reason for as long as they want. Curiously, the Dark Knight trilogy explores this legislation almost quite exactly. It's the Dent Act.
1,000 inmates in Blackgate Prison as a direct result of the Dent Act.
Llevamos más de 36,000 terroristas capturados y hemos incautado miles de armas y millones de dólares en droga y en efectivo.
I mean, maybe that's where they got the idea. Funny now, Bukele apparently has like this internal alias with people in his government, and they do call him Batman.
Le voy a mandar una foto de mi conversación con Batman, ¿va? Para que usted vea cómo está la situación.
66,000 people have been arrested in El Salvador, which turned it into the 4th country with the highest incarceration rate in the entire world. This video went viral around the world, and we're just about to fly out to the country. We're already planning this video, and I've really struggled to decide, to decide how I feel about this. These people are ruthless murderers. So how do you fix a country that's been taken hostage by its criminals? Can you realistically put them all on trial, assuming that none will slip away, that the prosecutors' families won't be threatened, and that no judge will be bought out? Can you trust the legal process in a country that's so badly sunk in crime?
527 counts of obstruction of justice,
How do the defendants plead?
I mean, we should be able to trust the law. The legal due process should be the solution, always. But it seems genuinely that El Salvador was just long past that option. And on the other hand, of course, this is an obvious and flagrant overstep of human rights. Well, they deserve the human rights that the world has agreed that every human has, even if they didn't honor those rights for the people that they murdered. I think that this is a debate with no right answer, and we were concerned about bringing this to a video. But the thousands of arrests the police has conducted were mostly based on appearances. Ironically, the MS-13 look that for so many decades terrorized the country became their obvious giveaway, and it made it so easy for police to identify them. Some other arrests have also happened because people have denounced suspicious behavior, but what happens if someone is arrested by mistake?
Pues presidente, de que él se ponga la mano en su conciencia y libere todito aquel que no debe nada, que está injustamente.
Si se trata con los criminales está bien, pero que anden deteniendo gente que no tienen nada que ver con pandillas.
Hay señores pues que casi que los desnudan en la calle.
What happens if an innocent person is arrested? How do you prove their innocence when no one is even expected to go to trial? The only glimpse that anyone has into what's happening in those prisons is what the government carefully produces and releases to the public in these marketing videos that they make. The state of exception, the régimen, was supposed to last for a month, but while we were in El Salvador, it was renewed for its 12th term, marking the first full year of exception. We felt safe. We walked with the cameras and drones and gear, looking like obvious tourists in rural communities around the country, and not even once did we feel unsafe. There are truly few developing countries around the world where you can experience something like that. Most Salvadorians support this decision, and no one, not even those who criticize or who are against Bukele more strongly, can deny how much this measure has transformed the country. But what happens next? And this is where I think things may take the darkest of turns. So here's the dictionary definition of this. Authoritarianism is a political system characterized by the rejection of political plurality, the use of strong central power to preserve the political status quo, and reduction in the rule of law, separation of powers, and democratic voting. This is quite exactly what's happening in El Salvador. Let's start with the media. Independent press is crucial to any democracy, but in El Salvador, most major press outlets are either affiliated directly or just plain out funded by the government. For the few independent outlets that are left, reporters who work there, who have written any articles that denounce government actions, are often put under surveillance with cars that get parked outside their houses or the houses of their family members.
En junio de 2022, sufrí un ataque personalizado por parte del abogado de un funcionario público que es el ministro de Gobernación, y esto ocurrió 5 meses después de una publicación de una investigación periodística que hice donde hablaba de 5 casos de violencia intrafamiliar. La campaña digital en mi contra fue tan grande, desde ataques misóginos, ojalá que aparezcas muerta, ojalá que te violen, ojalá que te pasen cosas horrendas. El punto es de que yo salí del país. Por seguridad no quisiera decir a qué país me fui. Hay unos patrones bien marcados contra los periodistas de investigación y yo me sentí vulnerada como mujer y como periodista. He sido víctima de seguimientos, a mí me han seguido camionetas. Mientras yo hago investigaciones, a mí me siguen carros, me han pinchado las llantas 2 veces en los últimos 2 años, las llantas de mi carro. Estas situaciones se han repetido en los últimos 3 años. Y se han intensificado.
Many journalists have just chosen exile over that possibility. Also, re-election. So re-election is illegal in El Salvador, or rather, it was illegal. During his tenure, Bukele was able to name enough supporting judges on the Supreme Court for them to allow consecutive re-election on the basis, wait for it, on the basis of human rights. So the next election for El Salvador is coming soon, early 2024, and it's almost certain that Bukele is gonna get re-elected. Now, don't get me wrong, re-election is not a bad thing necessarily, but we've seen this story far too many times in Latin America.
Nicaragua, Guatemala, to the government of Chile.
In El Salvador.
Military and security advisors from Cuba.
An immensely popular president rises to power. He is democratically elected, but he uses his power to sway the entire government to do their will. eventually letting them be re-elected indefinitely. This is Perón in Argentina, Ortega in Nicaragua, Evo Morales in Bolivia, Paraguay, Ecuador, Venezuela. Like, we've seen this story so many times. I told you, I'm originally from Costa Rica, and oftentimes we feel like this we're not an island, but it feels like this green island in this tumultuous ocean. We grew up hearing these stories. We grew up hearing these stories from the immigrants and the asylum seekers that end up in Costa Rica, who are escaping these dictatorships because this is how they started. There is no law in El Salvador today that would stop the police from imprisoning anyone who speaks against the government. Under the state of exception, arresting them would be 100% legal. But these examples are just too close to us to ignore. I mean, the closest one, Nicaragua, has seen hundreds of people dead or incarcerated because they protected against their dictatorship. The Nicaraguan government has cracked down on the press so hard that it doesn't allow tourists to bring cameras or drones into the country at all. If we had driven from Costa Rica to El Salvador for this documentary, they would have taken all our gear at the border. I've been to Nicaragua before. I was there years before it got so bad. And being in El Salvador now gave me this eerie feeling that in a few years, just standing here making this YouTube video might not be possible at all. I really hope that's not the case. And let's go back to Bitcoin, which brought us here for a moment. Seeing what has happened with Bitcoin, I really just can't see normal, everyday people adopting a digital currency. It's too complicated, it's too risky, and in a country where 70% of people don't have a bank account, there's a decades-long journey to make them understand what a Bitcoin wallet is and how it works. As a marketing stunt, maybe it works. Maybe this is a country PR stunt that has yet to pay for itself. Bitcoin or no Bitcoin, the truth is, El Salvador is back on the map. It's back on the map as the beautiful country that it is. It's back as a destination, as a peaceful and safe destination for tourists. It takes a lot of time to build that trust as a country, as a destination, but the hardest steps, I think, have already been taken. But can this peace last? This video is gonna live on YouTube for many years probably. And I want my skepticism to be proven wrong. I want to be wrong about everything that I've just said. I want El Salvador to break out of the cycle of history repeating itself. But all we can really do now is just wait and watch. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I just finished watching the last version of this, and I think it's gonna go ready for post. And just wanted to thank you, because if you're still here, you've essentially watched our longest documentary yet. This series, Tech Nomad, is my favorite to make. These videos are normally the 4 to 6 month project, from pre-production to actually traveling to figuring out the story and getting it peer-reviewed, and especially for this one that had so controversial topics to touch on, we wanted to make sure that we were on the right side of the facts. If you enjoyed this one, what I'd really love for you to do is to check out our video on Nosara, which is this small town in Costa Rica. That's the first Tech Nomad video we made, but by far the one that maybe carries the more craft and insane animation and grading. And I would love it if you guys told me sort of like the differences that you find between these two videos, and if we're actually going in the right direction with how the format has evolved. I'm gonna link that in the description. I'm gonna put like a video box somewhere around here on the screen. And yeah, please check it out. We'd love to hear what you think. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next week.